on two major stories as both the president and the vice president get ready to descend on the world stage. Mike Pence just arriving in Colombia to tackle the crisis in Venezuela as President Donald Trump gears up for his second summit with Kim Jong-un. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith.
Good morning, Sandra. And hello, everyone. I'm Eric Shawn in for Bill Hemmer. He's traveling to Vietnam for the summit today. Well, the Trump administration is saying that all options are on the table as the embattled Maduro regime continues to tighten its grip on its people, cutting off humanitarian aid that's aimed to help them. In 1 hour, the vice president will be sitting down with Juan Guaido, the man the U.S. and 50 other nations back in Venezuela after the horrible weekend of deadly violence during the protests on the ground.
Meanwhile, over at the White House, President Trump set to depart for Hanoi, Vietnam, just a few hours from now for this highly anticipated second summit with the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un. The White House cautious but optimistic ahead of that meeting.
We see eye to eye, I believe, but you'll be seeing it more and more over the next couple of days. As long as there's no testing, we're happy.
We've built out the world's coalition to communicate to Chairman Kim that now is the time, now is the moment, and I hope we'll make real progress on that this week.
Let's give Trump the latitude he needs to get the result we all want. We have a goal now. Give up your nukes. We'll provide you the security you need and help you become more prosperous. So what I hope will happen is that out of this negotiation, we'll have a roadmap and sort of a timetable that will get us there.
And it's just after 9 a.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. in Hanoi, where we find our John Roberts live reporting. John, what can we expect?
Eric, good morning from Vietnam. There's always the chance that there could be a breakthrough this week. There are officials in the government in South Korea that are talking about the possibility that President Trump and Kim Jong-un could finally sign an agreement to end the decades-long Korean War, which has only been in a ceasefire since the 1950s, never really ended. But it's expected that most of the progress here is going to be incremental. The president pursuing four goals in his talks with Kim, the so-called four pillars: establishment of new relations, a lasting and stable peace, complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, and recovering POW MIA remains. The most important thing for the president, he says, is to develop a relationship with Kim. The idea is that if the two leaders have an open and ongoing dialogue, progress can be built from there. Listen to what the president said last night at the Governors Association dinner.
It's a very interesting thing to say, but I've developed a very, very good relationship. We'll see what that means. But he's never had a relationship with anybody from this country and hasn't had lots of relationships anywhere.
The president's critics, though, say that he needs to get more from Kim than the last summit. While North Korea has not fired a missile or tested a nuclear weapon in more than a year, they have also not taken any concrete steps toward dismantling their nuclear program. In a letter to the president, Senate Democrats wrote, quote, "We believe your next meeting with Kim thus must demonstrate tangible, verifiable progress on denuclearization and reducing tensions with the North." But the president is willing to give it time, believing that building trust will reduce tensions and ultimately yield results. Listen here again, the president.
I'm not pushing for speed, but we're not removing the sanctions. And we're going to have, I think, a very interesting 2.5 days in Vietnam.
The president is also continuing his sales pitch to Kim that North Korea's economy can flourish if it chooses to end its isolation. Teeing up his speech to the Governors Association this morning, the president tweeting, quote, "With complete denuclearization, North Korea will rapidly become an economic powerhouse. Without it, just more of the same. Chairman Kim will make a wise decision." Talking to the governors just a few minutes ago, the president said he thinks he's going to have an incredible summit. The president will be leaving for Hanoi in the noon hour. Chairman Kim left for this summit on Saturday. He is traveling from Pyongyang in an armored train 2,500 miles through the Chinese countryside, and then when he gets to the border between China and Vietnam, he'll get into a motorcade and drive the final 105 miles. An interesting way to get here. He flew, by the way, Eric, aboard Air China 747 that the Chinese provided for him in last year's summit to Singapore. But this time, he decided to take the train.
All right, John, and we'll be covering this throughout the next 3 hours. Thanks, of course. Sandra?
Meanwhile, as we mentioned earlier, Vice President Mike Pence will be meeting with Venezuela's opposition leader this morning, the meeting following a weekend of violence along parts of Venezuela's border as troops loyal to Nicolas Maduro blocked humanitarian aid from entering the country. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo saying the United States continues to support Juan Guaido.
We're very hopeful in the days and weeks and months ahead, the Maduro regime will understand that the Venezuelan people have made its days numbered.
Let's bring in former Arkansas governor and Fox News contributor Mike Huckabee. Good morning to you, sir. So what needs to happen next year? How can the United States continue to pressure Maduro?
Well, I think we're doing it exactly the right way. We're showing the people of Venezuela that we stand with them and with freedom and with the return to economic stability. And the fact that the vice president himself is going to meet with the leaders of the opposition is incredibly significant. The fact that the Secretary of State is openly sending supplies and aid, humanitarian assistance, and then revealing and making it clear to the world that the Maduro regime is trying to block the most basic necessities of life. It kind of lets the whole world know what's at stake here and who are the good guys, who are the bad guys.
And while you've been talking there, Governor, we are looking at live pictures there on the ground in Colombia. The Vice President has arrived, and he will go on to this big meeting. And as we watch this unfold, Governor Huckabee, to what extent should the United States get involved here?
Well, I think the degree to which we are involved, and that is to show clear support. We're not going to go fight their battle for them. They've got to do that. But I remember back in 2009 when the Green Movement surfaced in Iran, and the United States did nothing. We didn't even offer them just a tip of the hat or a deep bow from the waist. We did nothing. And women and others were being slaughtered in the streets and their blood running down the sidewalk. We said nothing. We did nothing. This is a policy that has some strength to it. This is a policy that says the United States respects freedom and those who fight for it, and it is night and day difference, and I think it will have a significant impact in the ability of the Venezuelans to get their government back to where it's stable and economically prosperous.
On to the North Korean summit here, the second with Chairman Kim and the President, Donald Trump. Hanoi, Vietnam, the President's expected to depart shortly. Do you expect a breakthrough from this?
You know, I don't know that there's going to be an epiphany. I don't know if it's a big bright light on the road to Damascus kind of moment. I don't think that's probably going to happen. I've always felt that this was going to be a process, not an event. That getting the North Koreans to a point where they're willing to get rid of nuclear weapons in exchange for security and even having a shot at prosperity where their people can do something other than eat lawn clippings and have to lick the bark off trees because they're starving to death. The way to get there is to do it the way the President is doing, and that's taking it step by step, but giving every incentive to Kim Jong-un to make this transition from a nuclear dictatorship to at least, I'm not saying he's going to turn it into a democracy, he won't, but at least recognizing that there's no future for him in nuclear weapons. There is a future if he decides to denuclearize, and he can actually be a great leader for his own people, and that's what the President is seeking to present to him. It's going to take time, but the good news is we're seeing real progress we haven't seen in almost 70 years of dictatorship in North Korea.
And that's certainly what you will hear from the President and his team, while Democrats have sent that letter saying they want tangible, verifiable proof that we're making progress there. President willing to give it time. We'll see where this goes. He departs shortly for Hanoi. Finally, want to ask you about this. Bring it back here home, Governor Huckabee, for us. And Adam Schiff does not want to let this Mueller report go without seeing it made public. And if it is not made public, he says he's willing to subpoena Robert Mueller to testify over it. How far is he willing to go?
I think Adam Schiff will do anything he can to stay in front of a camera. The most dangerous place in Washington is anywhere between Adam Schiff and a TV camera. So if he can get some more airtime on some of the left of center networks, which is basically everybody, then he's going to do it. And it has nothing to do with what he finds. Adam Schiff, if he had information that the President actually colluded with Russia, he would have released it a long time ago. He's the biggest leaker in Washington. So it's fun to watch this guy. It's almost like get your popcorn, get some peanuts, settle down. The circus is about to begin. Here come the elephants. Let's watch.
Well, he is the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and he says we will obviously subpoena the report. We will take this to court if necessary. We'll watch it. Governor Huckabee, great to have you kick things off on this Monday morning. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sandra.
All right. And be sure to stay tuned. Fox News Channel will have special coverage of the U.S.-North Korea summit. Our own Bill Hemmer will be live from Hanoi, Vietnam. He's on his way there. He'll be co-hosting live from America's Newsroom from Hanoi starting tomorrow morning.
And we'll be looking forward to that. Meanwhile, there's some new developments in the ongoing trade negotiations with China. The Dow futures pointing to a higher open today after President Trump last night announced that he would meet with President Xi at the end of the month to settle on a final agreement. And that would mean a delay in increase in tariffs on Beijing. In the meantime, they were set to go into effect on Friday.
Doing very well with China. It was a long weekend. They decided to stay for 2.5 more days, and if all works well, we're going to have some very big news over the next week or two. The whole relationship has been outstanding. We put ourselves into a position of strength for the first time in about 35 years, or probably a lot more than that.
And Blake Berman is following the story live in the North Lawn of the White House. So, Blake, this could point to a real breakthrough.
Yeah, potentially, Eric. This seems to be moving in the right direction, at least after 4 days of high-level discussions over here in Washington on the White House complex between the top members of the U.S. trade team, top members of the Chinese trade team. President Trump declared yesterday that the end of work week deadline to get a deal done, for the moment at least, is now on hold. This is what the president tweeted last night. He said the following, quote, "I am pleased to report that the U.S. has made substantial progress in our trade talks with China on important structural issues, including intellectual property protection, technology transfer, agriculture, services, currency, and many other issues. As a result of these very productive talks, I will be delaying the U.S. increase in tariffs now scheduled for March 1st. Assuming both sides make additional progress, we will be planning a summit for President Xi and myself at Mar-a-Lago to conclude an agreement. A very good weekend for the U.S. and China." After that tweet last night, the president remained optimistic when he spoke to a gathering of governors over here at the White House.
It's really been terrific. I tell you, that whole relationship has been outstanding. We put ourselves into a position of strength. China has been terrific. We want to make a deal that's great for both countries, and that's really what we're going to be doing.
In the middle of the talks on Friday, the president told me he felt it was more likely than not that a deal would get done. Eric, China's top negotiator, also described the possibility of a deal as, quote, very likely. Eric?
So, Blake, does this mean now that there's a new deadline?
That's the question that we're trying to figure out. It's a good one. There has been no mention whatsoever of whether there may be a deadline, whether there might not be a deadline, and if there is a deadline, when that potentially could be, though the president just said in comments moments ago that we are expecting to get here shortly that there could be a signing ceremony soon.
All right, Blake, thanks so much. Sandra?
Yep.
Back to our top story today as the president prepares to leave for Vietnam a short time from now. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo saying the U.S. will abandon the previous administration's policy of cowering to North Korea. More on this with retired four-star General Jack Keane next.
And Virginia Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax, well, have you heard what he said? Making some stunning comparisons as sexual allegations mount against him. A reporter will dig into that straight ahead.
If we go backwards and we rush to judgment and we allow for political lynchings without any due process, any facts, any evidence being heard, then I think we do a disservice to this very body in which we all serve.
Change in U.S. policy since the time I've been Secretary of State, and frankly, even before that when I was CIA Director. Our objectives are clear. Our mission is clear. President Trump's also said this is going to take time. There may have to be another summit. We may not get everything done this week. We hope we'll make a substantial step along the way.
That's Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, of course, talking about North Korea on Fox News Sunday. This as the president gets set to depart for Vietnam in just under 3 hours from now. It will be his second sit-down meeting with dictator Kim Jong-un. What can we expect? Fox News senior strategic analyst, retired General Jack Keane joins us now. General, what concrete steps, if any, do you expect or can we see, do you think, from Kim Jong-un?
Yeah, I definitely think we can, but let me first set the table in terms of where we are. There's been no testing in 15 months. Good thing. And clearly, there's an improved relationship between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. The sanctions are still on, but Russia and China are not in compliance. There's been no progress on the core issue of denuclearization, and moreover, the intelligence community has come forward and made a public statement, certainly the president and his team knows this, that Kim Jong-un indeed is continuing to improve his nuclear and ballistic capability, and in the mind of the intelligence chiefs, does not show any signs of denuclearizing. So that's where we start.
How can he be pulled back? I mean, do you think eventually they'll have international inspections, that he will actually reveal all of his facilities, dismantle everything, and even pull back from the DMZ?
Yeah. Well, certainly it's doubtful based on the skepticism the intelligence community has, but I do think this summit will show some progress. Here's what I think the potential is. Number one, deals with ending the armistice and the war itself, which would be a step in the right direction, clearly. Why is that so? Because it would lead to pulling these armies away from each other that are at the demilitarized zone, and actually a reduction in the size of those armies, which would be something substantial, particularly for North Korea in terms of the amount of money it takes, you know, to fuel that army and take care of it. The other thing is, in the denuclearization, there's a difference in terms of what does it mean. For us, it means denuclearizing North Korea. Kim Jong-un's mind is the Korean Peninsula. Well, what does that mean? South Korea doesn't have weapons, and we have an umbrella over South Korea and Japan, but also China and Russia in the neighborhood have nuclear weapons. That's got to get resolved at this summit. And unfortunately, it didn't get resolved at the last one. I also think that we'll likely see North Korea give up some kind of a facility again. This time, likely an enrichment of fissile facility. In other words, in terms of fuel production. Is that consequential? Yes, but it also, on the flip side of that, they likely have all the fuel they need for the nuclear weapons they have.
You're talking about basically Yongbyon, but I mean, they've taken it offline before and put it back
online. And they've taken it offline twice.
And some people would say, well, he's not giving up anything at all. Yeah, he's put a pause in the tests now, but that basically he is ahead, Kim Jong-un is ahead, because he really hasn't given any real concrete concession.
Well, I just told you something that can be made. Listen, if they took it off twice and put it on back twice, it means something to them. And if they shut it down entirely, that is a step in the right direction. Pause. Do they have sufficient fuel for their nuclear weapons? Likely. Another thing I think they could do, and that is offer to dismantle the ICBMs that can reach the United States. That clearly would be a step in the right direction for President Trump. Now, that doesn't solve the problem of our allies in the region because they can still reach them with medium-range missiles. But nonetheless, it's a step in the right direction. The last thing I'd say is a pathway forward in a timetable. Since the last summit, Eric, there really hasn't been any negotiations and steps taken until just a few weeks ago when both envoys met.
Got 10 seconds.
And we need a pathway forward out of this summit with substance on that pathway.
Well, certainly hope that Kim will give up something and meet the president some way. So we'll have to see. General Jack Keane, always a pleasure. Thank you for your insight.
Okay, good talking, Eric.
Of course.
Thanks to the general there. Meanwhile, a new push today to reauthorize the 9/11 Victims Compensation Fund. It is running out of money. This afternoon, first responders, survivors, and their families will be on Capitol Hill as lawmakers introduce legislation to ensure permanent funding. Comedian and former Daily Show host Jon Stewart has been a major advocate for this, and he will be on the Hill today. He will join us live at 10:15 a.m. Eastern, a short time from now.
Where people were not given any due process whatsoever, and we rue that. We talk about hundreds, at least 100 terror lynchings that have happened in the Commonwealth of Virginia under those very same auspices, and yet we stand here in a rush to judgment with nothing but accusations and no facts, and we decide that we are willing to do the same thing.
That was embattled Virginia Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax in an impromptu Senate floor speech, comparing himself to lynching victims as he faces calls to resign over 2 sexual assault allegations against him. Fairfax also doubling down on calls for an FBI investigation into those claims. Garrett Tenney's following all this for us from Washington this morning. Garrett, so how did state lawmakers respond to Fairfax's remarks there?
Well, Sandra, this seemed to catch everyone off guard. It came just moments before the legislative session ended, and that's when Lieutenant Governor Justin Fairfax addressed the sexual assault allegations against him and compared them to terror lynchings that took place based on accusations without any facts. He appeared to be referencing legislation the General Assembly passed expressing profound regret for lynchings that previously took place in the state. And during his roughly 6-minute speech, Fairfax repeatedly denied the allegations against him and warned lawmakers of repeating history.
If we go backwards and we rush to judgment and we allow for political lynchings without any due process, any facts, any evidence being heard, then I think we do a disservice to this very body in which we all serve.
Lawmakers sat in silence at the end of Fairfax's remarks, but afterwards several Republican lawmakers called his closing comments comparing himself to lynching victims disgusting. However, a number of black lawmakers said they did not take any issue with it and said they have heard similar sentiments expressed by some of their own constituents who believe Fairfax is being treated unfairly because of his race. In terms of the investigations into the allegations, on Friday, a Republican state lawmaker announced the General Assembly will hold a hearing when the Assembly meets again in April. Lieutenant Governor Fairfax said he will not participate in that hearing, and state Democrats say it will be a political show and that law enforcement should handle the investigation. Attorneys for Meredith Watson, the second accuser, responded to that in a statement last week saying apparently the Virginia House Democratic Caucus believes that courageous victims of rape need to be heard, just not by them. Ms. Watson is counting on the General Assembly to do the right thing and hold hearings now. These nonstop efforts to duck their role is pure cowardice. Sympathy is welcome, but action is needed. And attorneys for Fairfax's first accuser, Vanessa Tyson, say she plans to meet with the district attorney in Boston to lay out her allegations from the rape that allegedly occurred in 2004.
Yeah,
Sandra?
Reaction continues to pour in this morning to all of that. Garrett Tenney in Washington for us. Garrett, thank you.
Well, Vice President Mike Pence has arrived in Colombia just moments ago. He will meet with Juan Guaido, the Venezuelan opposition leader, this morning. This as deadly protests broke out over the ground over the weekend as Maduro's brutal regime cuts off humanitarian aid to his own people. Coming up, we'll talk to a former Venezuelan diplomat who quit Maduro's government on what could come.
Governors from around the nation in the White House. Let's listen here.
All sort of get together and we have a good time, but we're going to accomplish a lot. It's going to be a very good meeting. Tremendous things are happening for our country. I'm now, right after this meeting, I leave for Vietnam, where I meet with Chairman Kim, and we talk about something that, frankly, he never spoke to anybody about, but we're speaking aloud, and I think we can have a very good summit. I think we'll have a very tremendous summit. We want denuclearization, and I think he'll have a country that will set a lot of records for speed in terms of an economy. And I told you last night, it was a lovely dinner, but I told you how well we did with our trade talks in China. And it looks like they'll be coming back quickly again, and we're going to have another summit. We're going to have a signing summit, which is even better. So hopefully we can get that completed, but we're getting very, very close. Ambassador Lighthizer, Steve Mnuchin, a lot of folks in the room have been helping, and that's been great. And I just see our great secretary sitting there on drug prices. First time in 54 years that drug prices have actually gone down this year. So, Mr. Secretary, thank you very much. That's a great job. Today is my honor to welcome our nation's governors back to the White House after a wonderful evening last night, and I'm deeply grateful for your presence, your partnership, and your friendship. Many of you are such good friends as we work together on behalf of all Americans. We're here to forge bonds of cooperation between our federal, state, and local governments as we strive to deliver a safe, bright, and prosperous future for every community in our magnificent nation. Thank you as well to all of my cabinet secretaries who are here today to share their energy, expertise, and devotion. They are devoted, they work so hard, and they're doing a terrific job. There are few, I say there are none, but there are few administrations that have accomplished what we've accomplished over the last 2 years. In the first 2 years, it's been pretty incredible with tax cuts and regulation cuts, more regulations than any other administration in history, and that's very important. And we still have regulation, but you don't have 10 of identical regulations that you have to get approved and wiped out from different departments. So we've really cut it down. A highway that would take 17 or 18 years of approval now takes probably 2, and we're trying to get it down to 1. And it may be rejected on various grounds, including environmental, but we have it down to 2, and we think we can get it down further. So that'll be something. You know, you have many highways and many roadways, and they're tied up for many years, and that won't be happening too much anymore. In my State of the Union address, I outlined many bipartisan priorities that we all share: delivering fair trade, rebuilding our nation's infrastructure, which we are going to work very hard on, because as governors, that has to be music to your ears.
You've been listening to President Trump there in the White House just a few moments ago in the state dining room addressing our nation's governors. It's a business session, although you heard right at the top there addressing his departure to Hanoi, Vietnam, just a short time from now, around the noon hour Eastern time. He's expected to depart on North Korea. He was talking about the denuclearization of North Korea, and he is predicting a very good summit with Chairman Kim. He also talked about bringing drug prices down here at home. He's expected to address a variety of subjects there to our nation's governors. We're going to continue to monitor this and bring you news from it as we get it. For now, we've got this Fox News alert. As Vice President Mike Pence arrives in Colombia, he is set to meet with the man the U.S. recognizes as the president of Venezuela, Juan Guaido, following a weekend of violent clashes over humanitarian aid shipments. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo keeping his options open when it comes to Venezuela.
We've said every option's on the table. We're going to do the things that need to be done to make sure that the Venezuelan people's voice, that democracy reigns, and that there's a brighter future for the people of Venezuela.
Former senior Venezuela envoy to the U.S., Isaias Medina, joins us now. Isaias, welcome, and thank you for coming on America's Newsroom this morning. Important to hear your voice as we saw that weekend of unrest over the weekend. First, your thoughts this morning, sir.
Thank you so much, and good morning, Sandra. Thank you for having me, and thanks to President Trump, Vice President Pence, to Secretary Bolton, to all the U.S. team that has been working to try to bring, the help that Venezuelan people need from the U.S. and from our allies around the world. I have to tell you, the world has witnessed the atrocity crimes of not only Maduro's proxy armed militias, but also by Cuban-led military that have been committing these ongoing violations of human rights and crimes against humanity. And it is time that right now in Colombia, with the special presence of Vice President Pence, with the presence of our interim constitutional president, Juan Guaido, and with President Duque and all the rest of the Lima Group representatives, that there comes out a decisive, uncompromising ultimatum with a very short deadline. This is very important.
We know that the Vice President, as you saw there, he arrived just a short time ago. We expect that he's participating in this bilateral meeting with the President of the Republic of Colombia a short time from now. He will then meet with Juan Guaido. You speak from a very unique perspective, Isaias. If you could just explain from where you come, having quit Maduro's government, witnessing what is happening there and what needs to come next.
Yes, what I can tell you, I have always worked for my country, for Venezuela. I was at the United Nations, contributing with the rest of the international community. And then, of course, in 2017, in the protest, they were shooting students, shooting civilians, and also violating the Constitution, usurping the rights of the National Assembly. And, of course, I had to draw the red line, and I had to stand out and speak out. And that's why I denounced 20 officials, including Maduro, the UN representative then, the UN representative now, today's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Delcy Rodriguez, and 20 other officials to the International Criminal Court for crimes against humanity by inducing a humanitarian crisis to remain in power. They have weaponized medicine scarcity and starvation to control the civilian population. And today we see the blockade, which is evidence of a continued crime against humanity. And this is why, yes, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
No, it's okay. We're listening to you, and I'm just wondering, what can the United States do here? Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, says all options are on the table. Obviously, increased sanctions are an option. To what extent do you want to see the United States act there?
That is such an important question because the United States has been crucial. The sanctions, the support, the humanitarian aid that has brought to the Venezuelan people, it has been right on point, and we could not thank them enough. But it is time for action. And the action, as all the options are on the table, are very concise and very, very precise. The Venezuelan president, Juan Guaido, has to invoke Article 187.11 of the National Constitution in Venezuela to invite a peacekeeping operation, a military operation other than war, to be able to bring a monitored international humanitarian intervention, to be able to comply with international humanitarian law and with the highest standards of human rights to save the lives of millions and millions of Venezuelans that today are starving and oppressed by this criminal proxy failed regime that has ties to international terrorism. So I do believe that instead of bringing Russian bombers and Iranian warships to our shores, we should be bringing the U.S. comfort to bring the largest Mercy hospital to help out with humanitarian aid, food, doctors, and of course it needs the military support because we've already seen what they're doing to the civilian population.
Really interesting to hear from you, Isaias Medina, as we watch the situation unfold there, and we expect to hear from the Vice President. He'll be speaking in Colombia a short time after these meetings this morning. We'll see what news comes from that as well. Isaias Medina, thank you for coming on the program this morning.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Eric?
And President Trump just moments ago speaking to governors at the White House. He was hailing the lowering of drug prices that he said is the first time this has happened in our country in decades, as well as previewing his upcoming departure for the summit with Kim Jong-un in Hanoi. We'll have a lot more on that in just a moment.
What a day it is. And DNC Chairman Tom Perez saying Republicans warning about socialism is just a political ploy. Former New Hampshire Governor John Sununu standing by to weigh in on that.
The Affordable Care Act, the Children's Health Insurance Program, all of those things were socialism. Why do they do that? Because they're wrong on the issues.
Dollars worth of cocaine inside a shipment of fresh pineapples. Federal agents discovering nearly a ton of the drug in the Savannah, Georgia seaport last November. The massive bust still under investigation, but what we do know is the pineapple shipment came from Colombia. European customs officials have also found cocaine hidden in pineapples.
The Democratic National Committee Chairman Tom Perez says that Republicans voicing concerns about socialism. Well, he says that's just a political trick that he claims is designed to distract from issues that people really care about. Perez spoke to Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday.
This is one of the oldest tricks in the playbook, Chris. You go back 75 years when Republicans don't want to discuss the issues that matter to real people. They call it socialism. Social Security, when it was being debated, you had Republicans calling it socialism. The minimum wage in 1938, you had Republicans calling it socialism.
Well, this comes as California Senator and Democratic presidential candidate Kamala Harris defends the Green New Deal's hefty price tag. She said, quote, "It's not about cost." What does all this mean? John Sununu joins us, former New Hampshire governor, former White House chief of staff under President George H.W. Bush. So is this, Governor, in your view, the Republicans just trying to do a Statue of Liberty play and distract, as Perez claims?
Well, it is an old claim. It's almost as old as the pandering politics of the Democrat Party. This is the party, the Democrats were the party that flirted with communism in the 40s and 50s. The Republicans criticized them for it to the point where Ronald Reagan left the Democrat Party, became a Republican. The attraction of socialism and communism to the Democrats has historically been so strong that Bernie Sanders chose to spend his honeymoon in the Soviet Union. So Perez just dismissing the criticism without taking the responsibility for the reason for the criticism is what's wrong with what he said. The Democrats are flirting with government takeover of life, limb, property, and freedom, and the Republicans are rightly calling them out for it.
What do you say to, you just mentioned Bernie Sanders. I mean, there's videotape all over the place of him praising the Soviet Union, praising what he saw when he went there, and also praising Cuba. I mean, is this the message that you think the American people want to hear?
No, they don't want to hear that, and the Republicans are fortunate that the Democrat Party is going back into this mode, and it's going to be a Donnybrook in the Democrat primary as they try to outdo each other on socialism and government control of our lives. I think they're making a serious political mistake, but as a Republican, I thank them for it.
That praising comes in tapes from 1988, but still you see the echoes resonate, you know, today. And we have Senator Kamala Harris, for example, kind of dismissing the price tag over the new Green Deal, which supporters say really is needed to deal with climate change. But here's what the California senator said.
There's no question we have to be practical. But being practical also recognizes that climate change is an existential threat.
Can we afford it?
Of course we can afford it. It's not about a cost, it's about an investment. And then the question should be, is it worth the cost in terms of the investment potential?
Well, doesn't she have a point when dealing with what we're facing?
Look, this has been the line of the Democrats since the mid-'80s, that climate change is going to destroy the world tomorrow. Tomorrow has never come. It is an issue that has to be addressed, but in a responsible way, not with the ridiculous Green New Deal that the Democrats are talking about, which would not only bankrupt America, but disrupt economies all around the world. There is a rational way to deal with tough problems. The Democrats are choosing an irrational road. I have said it before, they are quantitatively illiterate. She does not understand what $1 trillion is. She does not understand what it is in comparison to $1 billion or $1 million. She throws numbers out, and frankly, it's going to catch up with them as there's going to be more scrutiny of these wild claims and wild policies as she and others go into the Democratic primary.
Oh, and finally, do you think this will, you know, that'll abate, or do you think this will continue as the Democrats go, it seems, further left?
I certainly hope they go as far left as they'd like to go. It'll send the middle back to the Republican Party, and then we can get this country straightened out.
All right, Governor, spoken as a true veteran of politics, Governor John Sununu of New Hampshire. As always, thank you.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.
Vice President Mike Pence on the ground in Colombia, where he will be meeting with Venezuelan opposition leader Juan Guaido in just a matter of moments to discuss the unfolding crisis there and how to deal with Nicolas Maduro.
And this morning, President Trump was speaking to our nation's governors at the White House. This is just moments ago, taking on a variety of issues, from infrastructure to his meeting with Kim Jong-un and stressing border security. We'll bring you what he said next.
I put on Twitter, but I put on Twitter a piece of it. That's not the new prototype. The new prototype has started.
Change in U.S. policy since the time I've been Secretary of State, and frankly, even before that, when I was CIA Director. Our objectives are clear. Our mission is clear. President Trump's also said this is going to take time. There may have to be another summit. We may not get everything done this week. We hope we'll make a substantial step along the way.
That's Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, of course, talking about North Korea on Fox News Sunday. This as the president gets set to depart for Vietnam in just under 3 hours from now. It will be his second sit-down meeting with dictator Kim Jong-un. What can we expect? Fox News senior strategic analyst, retired General Jack Keane joins us now. General, what concrete steps, if any, do you expect or can we see, do you think, from Kim Jong-un?
Yeah, I definitely think we can. But let me first set the table in terms of where we are. There's been no testing in 15 months. Good thing. And clearly, there's an improved relationship between President Trump and Kim Jong-un. The sanctions are still on, but Russia and China are not in compliance. There's been no progress on the core issue of denuclearization. And moreover, the intelligence community has come forward and made a public statement, certainly the president and his team knows this, that Kim Jong-un indeed is continuing to improve his nuclear and ballistic capability, and in the mind of the intelligence chiefs, does not show any signs of denuclearizing. So that's where we start.
How can he be pulled back? I mean, do you think eventually they'll have international inspections, that he will actually reveal all of his facilities, dismantle everything, and even pull back from the DMZ?
Yeah. Well, certainly it's doubtful based on the skepticism the intelligence community has, but I do think this summit will show some progress. Here's what I think the potential is. Number one, deals with ending the armistice and the war itself, which would be a step in the right direction, clearly. Why is that so? Because it would lead to pulling these armies away from each other that are at the demilitarized zone, and actually a reduction in the size of those armies, which would be something substantial, particularly for North Korea in terms of the amount of money it takes, you know, to fuel that army and take care of it. The other thing is, in the denuclearization, there's a difference in terms of what does it mean. For us, it means denuclearizing North Korea. Kim Jong-un's mind is the Korean Peninsula. Well, what does that mean? South Korea doesn't have weapons, and we have an umbrella over South Korea and Japan, but also China and Russia in the neighborhood have nuclear weapons. That's got to get resolved at